My name is Ethan Cole, 34 years old, formerly a librarian at the Boston Public Archives. After my divorce last spring, I packed what little I had left, 2 boxes of books, a coffee pot, and a stack of half-written journals, and moved north to Vermont. I wasn't chasing happiness, just quiet. The kind that fills the air when there's nothing left to say. The town of Ashridge sat at the end of a long, winding road that disappeared into fog and pine. It wasn't on most maps. The realtor described it as peaceful, with good people and steady weather. That's what I thought I wanted. But peace is a strange taste in Ashridge. Thick, heavy, and hollow. The house I rented was a century-old cottage tucked near the edge of a forest. 2 stories, slanted roof, wooden porch that creaked like something alive. The owner, Mrs. Agatha Rowan, was an elderly woman with sharp eyes and a soft voice that carried an odd weight. She handed me the keys as if passing on something more than property. "Keep it tidy," she said, "and stay in after dark." At first, I thought she meant bears or bad weather. But soon, I realized it was something else entirely. Ashridge looked like any other New England town, until you noticed what wasn't there. It was late October, and yet there were no pumpkins, no fake cobwebs, no paper ghosts in windows. Children walked home from school without costumes, without candy bags. No one spoke of Halloween. Instead, strange customs filled the void. People poured lines of rock salt along their doorsteps, like protective barriers. Wind chimes made of bones clattered softly in the cold breeze. And every mirror was covered with black cloth, as if the townsfolk feared seeing something looking back. When I asked the grocer why no one decorated for Halloween, he didn't even look up from the counter. "It's the way we've always done it," he said, voice flat. Then, after a pause that lasted too long, "You'll get used to it." But I didn't. The silence in Ashridge had its own rhythm, like the town was holding its breath for something. On the night of October 28th, just as fog swallowed the last of the sunset, there was a knock at my door. It was Mrs. Rowan. She didn't step inside. She just handed me a faded yellow envelope, sealed with dark red wax. The seal was marked with a symbol I didn't recognize, 3 intersecting circles, like an eclipse. Her expression was grave. "For your safety," she whispered, "read it before Halloween. It's called the Covenant of Ashridge." Then she turned and disappeared into the mist, leaving me alone with the envelope that felt heavier than paper should ever be. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of yellowed paper, edges frayed, the kind that's been folded and unfolded for decades. The words were typed with an old machine, the ink faded to a dull gray. At the top, in capital letters read, "The Covenant of Ashridge, to be followed from sundown to sunrise, every October 31st. Below there were 9 rules. Before I could even finish reading, there was a knock on my door, gentle but urgent. It was Mrs. Rowan again, standing in the fog with a lantern that barely held back the dark. She looked smaller than before, fragile, as if the night itself drained her. "Follow these rules," she said, her voice trembling. "From sundown till sunrise. Don't question them. Don't test them. Just obey." And then she left, leaving me with the sound of wind pushing against the walls and the list that would decide whether I lived or died that Halloween night. I read each rule slowly, trying to make sense of it. 1. The hollow Tricksters, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. When you hear knocking at your door, soft, playful, like children asking for candy, check the mirror near the entrance before you answer. If the child reflected back looks wrong, or if there is no reflection at all, do not open the door. If you already made eye contact, draw a circle of salt around yourself immediately. Stay inside it until the knocking stops. Notes scribbled in pen beside it. They only want to be seen. Seeing them gives them shape. 2. The dust eaters. Before nightfall, scatter a handful of coarse salt and a pinch of ash across your doorstep. If the ash remains by morning, they have not eaten. That's bad. If it's gone, they were satisfied. They feed on decay. Mrs. Rowan once murmured behind me, "Better your offering than your home." 3. The echo caller, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. If you hear someone calling your name from outside, no matter whose voice it is, stand still and say exactly 3 times, "You're not real." Then walk away without looking toward the voice. If you answer, it learns your tone, and it will keep calling. 4. The Masked Watcher. If you see a man wearing a white, featureless mask standing outside your window, do not move. Do not breathe too heavily. He feeds on reaction. Every blink, every twitch draws him closer. Stay completely still for 30 seconds, and he'll vanish like a shadow at dawn. 5. The Whisper Twins. If you hear 2 children whispering just behind you, close like they're standing at your ear, do not reply. Even if they say the name of someone you love, cover your ears, close your eyes, and whisper a prayer. Any prayer you remember. Psalm 91, if you can. They mimic affection to get inside your head. 6. The Laughers. 11 p.m. When laughter begins circling your house, high, sharp, echoing like static, turn on every light. Look out the window only once. If you see figures dancing in the dark, turn everything off and hide. They fear attention until you give it twice. 7. The Silence Hour. Midnight, 1 a.m. Say nothing. Move nothing. Hold your breath if you must. The ones who hunt then, the stillborn ones, Mrs. Rowan wrote in shaky script, can hear the beat of fear. 8. The Flicker Signal. If the porch light flickers 3 times and dies, do not hesitate. Go to the basement. Wait for 1 hour in darkness. It means the shade has crossed your threshold. It cannot reach below ground, but it will try to. 9. The Pine Siren before dawn. If you hear a sweet, distant singing from the woods, tie yourself down. Bind your wrists. No matter what you hear, no matter how much you want to step outside, resist. Those who follow the voice never come back. At the bottom, in faded ink, there was one final line. Those who follow the covenant are spared. Those who break it become part of it. I sat there for a long time, staring at those words, the sound of the wind scratching at my windows. I wanted to laugh at how absurd it all seemed, but something deep inside me whispered that I shouldn't. Because outside, past the treeline, I swore I could hear a child giggling. And it wasn't even 6 o'clock yet. For the first 2 days after Mrs. Rowan's visit, I kept the Covenant of Ashridge folded in my jacket pocket, more as a strange curiosity than a warning. The list of rules sounded like something out of an old New England folktale, a patchwork of local superstition, maybe even a way to scare outsiders like me. I told myself people in small towns just needed their rituals. But the more I asked around, the more I realized no one wanted to talk about it. At the diner, when I brought it up to the waitress, an older woman named Ruth, her hands froze mid-pour. "You got one of those?" she asked quietly. Then, softer, "Don't laugh at it. That's how they notice you." I tried again at the general store. A boy no older than 12 stood near the candy shelf, watching me with wide eyes. When I asked him if he knew about the rules, he leaned closer, whispering like he was confessing a crime. "My dad didn't follow the 9th rule last year," he said. "They never found him." Before I could ask more, his mother grabbed his arm and hurried him out, shooting me a look I'll never forget, something between fear and pity. That night, I sat by the window with the paper spread out on my table. The edges trembled under the breeze sneaking through the cracks. The words seemed darker somehow, the ink thicker. I tried to laugh it off, but a voice deep inside me kept whispering, "What if it's true?" October 31st arrived under a sky the color of slate. The air felt heavier than usual, as if even the wind was holding its breath. By late afternoon, Ashridge was silent. Not quiet, silent. No cars. No dog barking. Not a single sound of children playing. The streets looked abandoned, yet every house glowed with light, curtains drawn tight, doors locked. It felt less like a holiday and more like a town under siege. Mrs. Rowan's house across the road was the only one with a candle burning in every window. I decided to play along, just to see what they were all so afraid of. As the sun dipped behind the pine ridge, I followed the instructions on the sheet, placed a small bowl of coarse salt by the door, mixed in a pinch of ash from my fireplace. Then I turned on the porch light, locked the door, and sat on the couch with a book I knew I wouldn't read. When the clock hit 6:02 p.m., it started. A soft, playful knock. 3 taps. Then a pause. Then again, knock, knock, knock. I froze. My breath caught halfway up my throat. Trick or treat. The voice was cheerful. Young, maybe 10 or 11. My heart eased a little. Maybe some kids had decided to trick me into believing the town's weird stories. I smiled to myself and walked toward the door. Then I remembered Rule 1. I turned my head toward the small mirror hanging beside the entryway. My smile died. The boy outside, dressed in a tattered scarecrow costume, was there. I could see him through the glass pane. But in the mirror beside me, nothing. No reflection. The air left my lungs in a single, trembling breath. I didn't open the door. I didn't move. The boy knocked again, louder this time. Then the knocking became pounding. Thud, thud, thud. The house shuddered with each hit. I stumbled backward, almost whispering to myself, "This can't be real." But the pounding didn't stop until the clock struck 9. Then silence. For a moment, I thought it was over. I almost laughed again, until I heard a voice outside. A voice I knew. Ethan. It was Claire, my ex-wife. Her voice was soft, broken, the same tone she used when we argued for the last time before she left. "Ethan, please. I need your help." I froze halfway to the door. My chest felt hollow. Claire lived hundreds of miles away. There was no reason, no way, she could be outside my house in Ashridge. But the voice came again, closer now. "Ethan, open the door. I'm hurt. Please." Every instinct screamed to open it. I almost reached for the handle when my eyes caught the paper on the table. Rule 3, the echo caller. If you hear someone calling your name from outside, repeat 3 times. "You're not real." My lips trembled. My throat went dry. But I forced the words out. "You're not real." Silence. "You're not real." A faint rustle from the yard. "You're not real." Then nothing. The air seemed to fold into itself. And then came a sound I can't forget. A dry, rattling laugh. Not Claire's. A man's laugh, deep and hollow, rising from somewhere beyond the tree line. The porch light flickered once, then steadied. That's when I realized the night had only just begun. The clock hit 11 p.m., and I felt it before I heard it. That strange, swelling pressure in the air, like the house itself was bracing for something. Then came the laughter. It started faint, like distant static, then grew louder, closer, until it circled the house. Thin, shrill, overlapping voices that sounded almost like children. But there was something wrong in the rhythm, something hollow in the sound. They weren't laughing at something. They were laughing for something. I crept to the living room window, careful not to make a sound. Through the curtain, I saw shadows darting between the trees, small, quick shapes, too fluid to be human. For a second, one stopped just beyond the porch. It had the outline of a boy, but its limbs were too long, bent backward at the joints. It tilted its head upward, and though I couldn't see its face clearly, I knew it was smiling. I lunged for the light switch and flicked it on. The porch light blazed white. Every bulb in the house followed, washing the windows in a harsh, sterile glow. And just like that, the laughter stopped. The shadows scattered like smoke in the wind. I let out a shaky breath, half laughing myself. Jesus Christ. Maybe that was it, I thought. Maybe the light trick was all there was to it. Just a bunch of creepy kids pulling Halloween pranks in an old, superstitious town. Then the porch light flickered. Once, twice, 3 times. Then steady again. I froze. The number hit me immediately. 3. Rule 8. The flicker signal. When the porch light flickers 3 times, go to the basement and wait 1 hour. It means the shade has crossed your threshold. My first thought wasn't fear. It was annoyance. It had to be a power surge. Old house, old wiring. Vermont wasn't exactly known for its grid reliability. I told myself it was nothing, just coincidence. So I stayed. I stayed sitting there in my living room, the lights buzzing faintly above, my reflection trembling in the darkened TV screen. I remember even saying it aloud, trying to convince myself, it's just bad wiring. That's when I heard it. Thud. A single, heavy step, coming from above. I looked up at the ceiling. The old boards groaned. Dust fell from the seams. Then, Another step, slower this time. Then another. Something, or someone, was walking across the attic. The house had been empty for years before I moved in. There was no reason anyone should be up there. I told myself maybe it was raccoons, maybe wind shifting the beams. But the steps were too heavy for that, too deliberate. I reached for the kitchen drawer and pulled out a knife. My hands were slick with sweat. The steps moved toward the stairs that led down to the hall above me. The sound grew louder, each tread drawn out, weight pressing into the wood until it creaked in protest. Whoever, or whatever, it was coming down. I held my breath, knife trembling in my grip, eyes fixed on the shadow at the base of the staircase. And then, crash! A picture frame fell off the shelf beside me, hitting the floor with a sharp crack of glass. That tiny noise shattered the silence. The footsteps stopped. The air changed. It felt thick, like being underwater. The light bulbs dimmed, flickering weakly. The temperature plummeted. My breath came out in fog. Then, from the ceiling above, a shape began to form. A hand, if you could call it that, pressed through the plaster. Long, spindly fingers, black as smoke, but moving like liquid, dripping shadows that hissed as they touched the floor. It reached down, searching, probing the air. The smell of ozone filled the room, sharp and metallic. I stumbled backward, unable to look away. The hand brushed across my face, cold beyond comprehension, like the air from an open grave. For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred, ears ringing, and then it was gone. The ceiling was whole again. The lights buzzed back to life. But something in the air was wrong, tainted, like the space around me had been rewritten. That's when I finally ran. I bolted for the basement door, yanking it open, heart pounding in my throat. The air down there smelled of dirt and old wood, but it felt safer somehow, denser, thicker. I slammed the door shut behind me and crouched in the dark, gasping. My phone said 12:04 a.m. I had broken Rule 8, and whatever that thing was, it had touched me. The skin where it brushed burned like ice. When I looked later, in the flicker of my flashlight, I saw a faint black mark across my cheek, like soot, but it wasn't soot. It pulsed. I spent what felt like hours in that basement, sitting against the cold concrete wall, knife still in my hand, staring at the faint black mark on my cheek reflected in the dull beam of my flashlight. The air was heavy, thick with dust, mold, and the faint copper scent of something ancient. Every few minutes I thought I heard something above me, a faint creak, a whisper, a dragging sound, but it never came closer. When the house finally settled into silence, I forced myself to move. My flashlight flickered across rows of old shelves, tools, and boxes left by previous tenants. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just something to occupy my mind, something to keep me from hearing the echo of that laugh outside. That's when I saw it. A small wooden chest pushed beneath the staircase, half covered in cobwebs. It looked older than the house itself, hand-carved, bound by rusted iron latches, the kind of thing you might find in a museum or buried under floorboards in an old church. I pulled it out and brushed away the dust. The latch was brittle. It snapped off with a twist of my knife. Inside were documents, hundreds of them, bundled together with faded string. Yellowed papers, photographs, brittle ledgers, each stamped with the same symbol I'd seen on the envelope Mrs. Rowan had given me. 3 intersecting circles. The top page was dated October 31st, 1893. This night marks the covenant between the living of Ashridge and the pale ones that dwell beneath the pines. In exchange for observance, silence, and sacrifice, peace shall remain upon our land for 1 year, and 1 year only. I kept reading. The entries described an agreement made after a series of disappearances that nearly wiped out the early settlers. The survivors claimed the woods were alive with watchers, pale figures with hollow faces who came for anyone who defied their customs. The compact was a truce. 1 night each year, Halloween, the townsfolk would follow a precise ritual to keep the pale ones appeased. The rules were passed down generation after generation, each one slightly altered, but always the same in spirit. A night of obedience, in exchange for another year of safety. It wasn't superstition. It was maintenance. I turned to another set of papers, handwritten rosters, lists of names organized by year. At first, I skimmed them without focus. Then one line made me stop cold. Agatha Rowan. Age, 29. Resident since 1904. That couldn't be right. Mrs. Rowan looked old, very old, but not impossibly so. Yet here her name was printed in ink over a century ago, alongside the names of people who would have been dust long before I was born. I flipped through the documents faster now, heart hammering. Her name appeared again in 1915, and again in 1927, and again, every decade, always the same handwriting, always listed among the residents who survived that year's observance. She hadn't aged. She had stayed. At the bottom of the chest was a bundle of photographs wrapped in wax paper. The oldest were barely visible, blurred by time and moisture. But one photo caught my attention. It showed a group of townsfolk standing near the tree line, men and women dressed in late 19th century clothing. At the center stood a young woman unmistakably recognizable as Mrs. Rowan. Her hair was dark then, her eyes sharp, that same unreadable calm I'd seen when she handed me the envelope. Standing beside her was a tall man in a suit, his face hidden behind a white, featureless mask. I felt the air leave my chest. The masked watcher. Rule 4. The figure's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, and she didn't look afraid. She looked content. I stared at the photograph until my vision blurred, a rising cold spreading from my stomach to my throat. That's when the floorboards above me creaked again, slow, deliberate. Not like before, not random. It sounded like footsteps pacing, and then a voice, a whisper I barely caught, drifted down through the cracks. "Ethan," it said, soft and patient. "You've read enough." The flashlight sputtered out, and I was left alone in the dark with the truth still echoing in my head. Ashridge wasn't haunted. It was kept. It was close to 3 in the morning when the sound began. Soft at first, like a hum carried on the breeze, weaving through the pine trees outside. Then words began to form, delicate and melodic, a woman's voice whispering just beyond the walls of the house. "Ethan, come see me." My blood ran cold. The words seemed to echo inside my head rather than outside. The timbre was gentle, almost loving, soothing in a way that made my eyelids heavy. For a moment, I forgot the fear. I forgot the rules. I forgot why I shouldn't open that door. But then a pulse of clarity struck me. Rule 9. When you hear the sweet singing from the pines before dawn, tie yourself down. Do not go outside. With trembling hands, I grabbed the rope I'd found in the basement earlier. I looped it around my wrists, around the leg of the heavy desk, pulling tight until the coarse fibers bit into my skin. I thought it would hold, but the singing grew louder, richer. It filled every corner of the house, curling through the walls like smoke. I could almost see her silhouette in my mind, standing among the trees, the wind in her hair, smiling. My breath slowed. My heartbeat synced with her melody. The rope slipped. It didn't break. It simply loosened, like the fibers themselves were obeying her call. I tried to fight, to stay down, but my body betrayed me. My legs moved first, then my arms, my mind screaming no as my feet carried me toward the front door. It opened by itself, and there she was, Mrs. Rowan, standing in the doorway, her shawl fluttering in the cold night wind. But her eyes, they weren't her eyes anymore. They were bottomless, black wells that reflected no light at all. "Don't fight it, Ethan," she said softly, her voice now perfectly matching the song from the woods. "It's your turn now." I tried to speak, to plead, but my lips only moved soundlessly. My body was no longer mine. Each step forward felt like sinking into water. The air outside was thick with mist. The forest loomed ahead, the trunks like black pillars. And beneath the whispering pines, I saw them, figures, pale and faceless, swaying gently as though listening to the song too. The melody grew sweeter, wrapping around my thoughts like silk. My last coherent feeling was the warmth of tears freezing on my cheeks, as I crossed the threshold into the trees. Then silence. The singing stopped. Only the wind remained, carrying with it the faintest echo of Mrs. Rowan's voice. "Welcome home, Ethan." Morning light spilled across the empty living room. The police marked the area off with yellow tape, their boots crunching softly over the scattered salt on the floor. A length of rope lay snapped beside the desk, fibers frayed, as if torn apart by something far stronger than human hands. No sign of Ethan Cole. No footprints leading into the woods. Just the open doorway, the cold wind, and the faint smell of pine drifting through the air. A week later, the house was rented again. The new tenant, a young woman named Mara Dean, moved in with a box of books and a hopeful smile. She told the realtor she liked the quiet charm of small towns. Ashridge, with its faded storefronts and endless trees, felt perfect. On her first evening, as she unpacked, she found a yellowed envelope lying neatly on the kitchen table. Wax seal. Red. The same 3 interlocking circles stamped into its surface. The handwriting on the front read, "For your safety, the Covenant of Ashridge." Curious, Mara broke the seal. Inside, a single page, typed, old, edges curled by age. Rule 1. The hollow Tricksters, 6 to 9 p.m. When you hear knocking for candy, look in a mirror first. If the child has no reflection, do not open the door. Mara frowned, half amused, half unsettled. Weird old folklore, she murmured. Then, 3 soft knocks at the door. Knock, knock, knock. A small voice giggled outside. Trick or treat.